Okay, you guys all ready?
Sí, señorita.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Story Studio podcast. This is the last of 3 episodes where myself, Neve, and Bonnie and Ninety, we got to steal the show from the guys, which was kind of fun.
I got to listen to the last 2 episodes. That was fun.
Yeah, it was kind of fun, and it was really funny. Like the first couple ones, it was like, oh, like sure, intro, outro. That was all I was expecting to do, but I was suddenly like, wow, Johnny just has all this finesse when he does it. How does he do that? But today we are interviewing Sean Platt, and specifically we want to talk to Sean about how to write anything. Sean is really well known in our studio for being a chameleon, as well as, yes, having a big nose and a big mouth. But he writes in all kinds of different genres. So we want to talk about that.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know what I was going to talk about today, and I'm excited to talk about that because I've been thinking about it a lot lately. So, yay.
Well, we were like, we wanted to get at like, okay, what's the really, the skill that each of these guys really has that people are like, how do they do that? So I think that's what it is for you. So now I'm going to ask you the toughest question that we're going to ask you all evening, day, whatever time it is for you.
It's 2:08 for me right now.
Which is to tell us briefly the story of how you got into self-publishing.
Oh, all right. Let's see if I can do this in 2 minutes. All right. So I was a copywriter and a ghostwriter. And I think it was really the blend of those two things. The fact that for a long time I had to get out of my head, out of fiction. I really did want to write fiction, but fiction was not paying the bills in 2008, and copywriting was, or at least that's when it started to. And so I really had to get out of my head and learn how to write things that kept people on the page and converted them to go do something. And I think that was the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to my writing, is that I needed to use it to survive. And so that made it about the customer or the reader instead of me really fast. Like I had to get out of my head and just make way for whatever is going to happen with the words. And when I was a ghostwriter, it was, well, I'm only going to get paid for how much I write. So I had to write really fast. And originally I was writing 10 SEO articles a day, or no, I'm sorry, 20. I always say 10 because it's 10,000 words, but they were 20, 500 words each. And I would research that shit too. I mean, research just enough to like be able to bullshit for 500 words, because this was like early SEO. So it was like, if you were trying to rank for garbage, it was just like, garbage is fun. I like playing in garbage. I like to talk about garbage and tell people about garbage, and that would actually rank. So I would write 20 of those a day, which was 10,000 words. And then I realized, wow, that's a lot of words for $100 a day, because they were $5 each. Maybe if I, wrote something more valuable, I could make more money. And so I did. I learned copywriting, and then I did that for a few years and had some, I really scaled up in the level of what I was writing and the clients I was dealing with, and incurred a lot of debt, paid off a lot of debt. And then when Kindle dropped in 2011, it was just like, well, of course, this is what I'm going to do. And that was 9 years ago. And I've spent the last 9 years, I think, constantly trying to get more intelligent about the way I attack this, so that, collectively with the studio that we're building, we can really take publishing into tomorrow.
That was actually pretty succinct, and yet you said a lot. So
I can do it every once in a while. I just need to be challenged.
Well, see, that's it. That's why that was the most challenging question. So we do want to talk about like how you move between genres and all of that great stuff. But what genres have you actually written, and can you remember them all?
Okay. Let's see, without running out of steam. Children's, like, very, very young children, like Dr. Seuss style children, like preschool level, like chapter books, which I wrote for Haley when she was little, middle grade, young adult, sci-fi, mystery, thriller, romance, erotica, like really dirty erotica, humor,
Humor erotica, I've seen.
Humor erotica, yes. Sci-fi erotica. The erotica rabbit trail went 1.3 million words deep. So there is that. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we talk about writing in any genre. Poetry, what else? I mean, we're just talking like book genres here, right?
Yes, or this will be the entire episode.
I think that covers the main spectrum right there.
So all the genres.
Oh, and literary, like, which has actually been a lot of that lately.
Okay, of those, do you have a
Fantasy?
favorite?
There was definitely a little bit of fantasy in there.
So do you have a favorite genre?
No, I really don't have a favorite genre. I have a favorite vibe. I have a favorite, like, there's an energy to what I really love writing or working on. So writing to me isn't just getting rough draft words in. Like, I work as hard on something that I write with Johnny, where I'm just editing and polishing and kind of coming up with some of the bare bones ideas before we start, as I do on, say, the thing that I'm writing right now, where I was in the story room for the inception of the idea. I will write the rough draft and polish it and everything. But it's not like really less work, because the time spend is very similar. The emotional bandwidth is very similar. If I'm editing and writing something that is from an outline of Dave's, from a draft of Dave's versus just writing that draft myself. Sometimes writing the draft myself is actually less work than editing and polishing something. So what I like about working with different people is that I get exposure to a lot of different styles and a lot of different voices and a lot of different rhythms and a lot of different ideas and a lot of different sensibilities. And then I kind of bring them back in, and I figure out what works for me and what's going to make me a better storyteller, both for myself and for the people that I collaborate with. And that's a really, really fun process. So I think that when I'm going from totally different genres, I think it's about finding what I love in that story, and the feeling that I really want to care about it. And I haven't cared about everything I've written. And that's when writing is harder. It's when writing is usually less rewarding. But the vibe, like, I love stories that make me feel and think when I read them or when I write them, because I know that at least some of that has to pass on to the reader. I like stories that I know that when I read them out loud to Cindy later, I'm going to cry a little bit at some point. Like, I really do like that, because I know that the words are effective and the emotions there are effective. I love laughing. I like laughing in real life. And I think that there's not enough opportunity in stories for people to laugh. So the kind of narrative that I'm really looking for as a writer, it's not about genre. It's about twisting a genre or subverting expectations in a way that does something different. Now, that's not always what sells. In fact, it's rarely what sells. So the kind of storytellers that I'm really drawn to, like tonight on Netflix, as we're recording this, Charlie Kaufman's new movie is dropping. And I'm so stupidly excited about watching that. All right, I know that, when I read reviews on it next week, people are going to be like, who does this guy think he is? What kind of story? This is not a story. It's not a thriller. Like, I can already see it. And that's fine, but I always remember his movies. I've seen a lot of thrillers in the last year that I barely remember. I know I'm going to remember whatever experience he gives me, because I won't have had that exact experience before. So I'm always trying to bring that to my work. And I know that right now, as we're really trying to build our reputation, it's harder to take those chances, but I take them where I can. And all of my collaborators, I think, are not only tolerant of that side of myself, they embrace it and they like it, and they're inspired to do the same. So I don't have a favorite genre, but anytime I can take a genre and make it fresh while still making it commercial, I find that very exciting.
I've got a question about, you said that there were some things that you really liked. What do you not like? What do you just go, oh man?
I'm a really romantic guy, but I don't like romances anymore. Like, I don't want to write them. I just find them too formulaic. I don't like this will sound disrespectful. It is so not disrespectful. but I don't like really the audience or the culture around the books. And let me be specific about that, because it sounds like I'm disparaging both the quality and the people who are reading. And it's not that. It's that they're so consumable that I don't feel like they really make the impact with readers that I'm looking to make. So when, you know, if I look at the stuff that I've written with Johnny, my least favorite of our entire catalog is the time we spent with romance, because those books just kind of all blend in together. There's not, you know, and we broke a lot of rules. Like, we tried to take our romance series and tie it into the Beam, our most complicated, like we did just dumb, non-commercial things, and still it's my least favorite of the stuff that we've done, because it, you know, every book really did follow a template. I wasn't nearly as involved with the creation there. I really just was an editor polisher some of the times, because we'd come up with a you know, like a really basic premise and some characters, and then Johnny was like, I got it. Right, because the stories were so straightforward. So I like romance in my stories when it's well placed, but a story that is just a romance, that would be the first thing that would drop off my radar. And hilariously, I would much rather write erotica than romance, because erotica is short and it's to the point, and it has like a mission to fulfill. You know, it's like, it's supposed to make somebody feel something really dramatic very quickly. And maybe that's just bias, because when I did write erotica, I got a lot of feedback from people who really liked it. And, you know, like, as authors, we all want to hear that what we're doing is effective. And so I really liked that I could write 3,000 words and get an email about it, like a lot of emails about it. Where with romance, it was just so crowded in the marketplace. And maybe that's it. Maybe that there's so much like lower tier erotica out there that when something was like a cut above, it was like, thank you. I don't know. But yeah, romance would be the first genre that I would just cut off.
How do you feel about the books that you have written? Do you have favorites? I mean,
Oh yeah, of course.
How many books? How many books have you written?
Yeah, do you mean like where I've handled the rough draft, or start to finish, I've been involved with them start to finish?
Yeah.
Being a collaborator, maybe.
Whichever, just.
Oh, over 200. I really don't know. Over 200, maybe close to 3.
Favorites, right?
Yes, I have favorites.
Among those.
Yes.
What are they?
Wow. Okay. Off the top of my head, I really love both Yesterday's Gone and Unicorn Western. Those are singular experiences, both of them. One, I think, kind of really helped to kickstart the indie game a little bit, which I know is a grandiose thing to say, but you know, it wasn't just that the episode and serialized language that we kind of brought to market there. It's the championing of it that we did, and that we were really just loud and excited when we started our podcast, and that's what we were talking about, you know. So I really have a lot of love for that series, and I have a lot of love for Unicorn Western, because it started as just a joke, you know, and then that's when I started writing with Johnny. And I thought we would write one little stupid thing together, and that was it. And it was just so much fun writing those 9 books. And specifically tipping from that to the Beam, which was our next project, which is so different and so good. You know, the Beam is another one of my favorites, no doubt about it. But Unicorn Western is really special. Like, I'm really excited to write Unicorn Apocalypse someday, which will be like the follow-up to that. You know, it's a book that Johnny and I have talked about for years now, as like a celebration when all of our boxes are closed and we're in a really good creative place. We're just going to write Unicorn Apocalypse, and the world will be that much sweeter. I really love a couple of books that I've written with Bonnie that are not, they're just in a literary pile right now. But one is, I think, like maybe the highest I tried to reach so far is, hey, here's what I'm trying to accomplish emotionally with a book. And then one that was just the most confessional I've ever gotten so far, which was like, love me daddy, you know, like that kind of book. And I don't know, what else do I really love? I mean, those are the highlights. I don't know how long a list you want, but off the top of my head, you know, because those are the classics. All of those things started something, and I'm really into beginnings and endings, you know, and I don't know what my ending is with Dave or Johnny yet, but those two books kind of, the literary ones I was talking about, kind of signify a beginning with Bonnie. You know, there's a few things that we've done in the thriller space, but one of the joys of working with Bonnie has been that she understands that I'm going to write in any genre, and she appreciates that I'm going to write in any genre. And we have plans to experiment in like pretty much every genre, right? We talk about genre all the time. But what Bonnie has done for me that no one else has really done for me is to figure out who I am as a writer and try to sharpen and strengthen and just bring the best out of me. And that's not to say that my other primary collaborators, Johnny and Dave, don't bring the best out of me, but they don't, that's not their focus. That's not their attention. In fact, it's the other way around. I'm really trying hard in those collaborations to bring the best out of Johnny or the best out of Dave, and make sure that that's what's on the page is the very best that our collaboration can offer. And especially if they're writing the drafts, I want to be somewhat invisible and just make their work really shine. And I've never had anyone do that for me. Like, and it's really nice. So I'm very appreciative of my collaboration with Bonnie, and it gives me even more confidence that I will do a better job genre hopping going forward, because I've done it thus far because I really love it. But I think I've done it like, you know, like, you know, a kid who's just figuring things out, you know, doesn't really know the world yet. I think Bonnie's been able to help me slow down and make better decisions about the genres I'm choosing and why, and then being more practical within the boundaries of those stories.
One thing I really love working about you is how mentally flexible you are. Like, it doesn't matter what story we're talking about and what genre we're in. Like, you can immediately switch to another genre or another story just like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you either like maybe a little bit about how you develop that fluidity, and also like, is there some sort of framework that you have that you're using to kind of translate from one genre to the other?
Yes. Okay, so the first part of the question is just like, how do I do that? I think there's a couple things going on there. Well, a few things. I think one is that I do have a pretty malleable brain for that. Like, not only am I naturally more adept, I actually feed on that. I mean, you guys know I don't even finish half my sentences. Right? I just start it and then I go to another one. So like, my brain is, you know, I don't mean like, I'm not patting myself on the back when I say it moves fast. It's more like a fucking cat that won't slow down, right? It's just a little bit all over the place. And so being able to jump to a new idea is like, well, okay, that's where you want to go. I'm right there with you. But I think a lot of it too is, you know, coming up as a ghostwriter, I didn't get to choose what I wrote every day. Like, I wanted to feed my family. Like, that's all I cared about. So, you know, my first site ever online was writerdad.com, and I got, you know, I had a decent amount of traffic there, but it was people who just wanted to see me, you know, write rather masturbatory things about like being a dad. Like, it was so like nothing to do with that traffic. And so I got another website called Ghostwriter Dad, and figured that, hey, if you like what I write over here, maybe I can, you know, write a complaint letter to your boss. And it actually worked. This is before I actually learned, you know, copywriting and sales letters and all that stuff. That was the marketplace where I learned that, because I would see what people were willing to pay for different kinds of copy. And what I was naturally good at in the earliest days was SEO. You know, because I did all those cheap $5 articles, and I learned to like do it in a way that wasn't embarrassing and like clever. Actually, this is worth taking a moment for, because there was a lot of like outsmarting SEO that I did back in the day, where I would finish a sentence with like part of the keyword phrase and begin a new paragraph with another keyword phrase, so it wouldn't like read like an asshole wrote it. But that like I was trying to do a good job, which hilariously nobody cared. Like, I was never once complimented on how well I disguised my keywords. Like, never. But there was like a point of pride that even if I was doing garbage work, I was going to do it well. But being a ghostwriter, you know, very quickly I got rid of the keyword articles, and I would do things like complaint letters. I would do things like wedding vows. I really like writing wedding vows, because I charged a lot of money for them, and 90% of it was repeat. Like, I could take a lot, like I just needed to individualize them enough. But again, wedding vows are like, not only am I naturally good at that kind of language, that flowery, like I write love letters to my wife all the time. That's why she, or at least I used to, before I was a professional writer. It's true. Before I was a professional writer, I wrote Cindy all the time, which is why I didn't really believe that I was a good writer when she told me. I'm like, well, I tell you I love you in like a lot of different ways. I understand why you think I'm a good writer. But I think that elasticity was born then at, I'm going to write whatever comes in, because at my best, I actually had the page 1 result for Ghostwriter, which I held for about a year and a half. And the only thing that knocked me out of it, I mean, and that was paying all my bills, because I got a lot of traffic from, including drunk traffic, people calling, you know, like 3 a.m. to tell me their life story, which would make a great book if I would only ghostwrite it and they could JV. Like I did get those calls a lot. But the only reason I got knocked off of page 1 was because Roman Polanski had a movie that came out called The Ghostwriter. And then I didn't have a chance. Like I was just done. But anyway, when I did have that spot, I just took whatever job whatever I got. So I was always, always, always jumping to something new. But lastly, I really want to be there for my collaborator. And so if they think another direction is better, another genre is better, another way is better, then okay, like I know I'll find the joy in whatever that is, or my side of whatever that needs to be, and we'll make it something great together. But that's why it doesn't really matter to me. I think that flexibility comes from a wanting to please and you know, be the person who can be that malleable, but also the experience of being that malleable.
Could you collaborate with just anybody?
No. We have to share some basic aesthetic. So there's been collaborations that don't work out. I can't collaborate with someone who won't do the work. You know, so we've had people come in and I'll give them, you know, really thorough edits, and they're like, oh yeah, that's not really what I was interested in. We had somebody who I was really excited to collaborate with because they knew how to basically churn 45 grand a month on, you know, writing, like publishing rough drafts. And when I realized that they had no interest, I thought it was a win-win, because I could learn how to move fast and leverage the market and, you know, lean into the algorithms and things like that. And I believed that what I was bringing in was a sense of quality, and this is how you become a better storyteller. And when I realized that there was none of that, it was just about making money, I'm like, that's not the kind of thing I want to do. That's not the kind of story I want to make. And like, so we got one rough draft together, and then that stopped. Recently, you know, we were working, Johnny and I were actually working with someone on a screenplay, and their version of the project, it was an option type thing, and they were taking it, and their version of the project versus our vision for the project was just very, very different. And ultimately we're like, you just can have it and do what you want with it, because that's better than us like thinking this is stupid. And so we're still getting updates that we have to pretend to care about, like, oh, good for you, exclamation mark. But it's, in that case, it was, we fundamentally disagreed on what makes a good story. We fundamentally disagreed on what was funny about humor. And so there was a couple of non-starters, and we're just like, yeah, we're not really seeing it this way. And like, just as one example, like this is a project that is humor, and it's loud parody. Like it can only exist in a world of parody as far as I see, but they're trying to interpret it as a gritty type of thing, and there's nothing gritty about it. And so that's not worth butting heads. Like, collaboration to me should feel really fluid. It is amazing to me that in 10 years of working together, an average of 10 years, I've got, I think, 8, 9 with Johnny and 12 with Dave. But in the 20 years between them, we don't have a single creative argument. We've had arguments, but they're about like stuff, like business stuff and life stuff, not about our work at all, never. You know, I can imagine maybe arguing with one of them about something. I can't even conceive of a constellation where Bonnie and I have an argument about anything relating to story. So I think that, no, I can't work with anyone, but I think the people I can work with, I can pretty much work with them in whatever capacity happens. I think like I will eventually collaborate with Neve on story, but right now we're collaborating on business. And it's the best business collaboration I've ever had. And I've had a lot. And I feel at this point that even though it's still really new, I feel like there's an infinity of what we can do. And I've never felt that in business before. I felt the promise of that. Or like, maybe that could happen if X, Y, or Z happens. But this really feels like I can tell any story on a business side. And with Bonnie and Johnny and Dave, I feel like we can tell mostly any story. And let me qualify that too, because I think this goes into what you asked earlier, Bonnie, about like, how do you continue to be adaptable in that way? So yesterday, we were in a story meeting. It was me and Bonnie and Joel and Dave. And there's something I keep trying to impress upon Dave. And I want enough time with one of his drafts to really dig in and kind of get some really good examples of this. But it's that he repeats the same things over and over. And they're not tropes or themes or even plot lines, because I think all of that stuff is okay. You know, the people who really like your work, they want to see it, you know, kind of the same story over and over, just different, different bow on it. But there's something about experience that is sometimes lacking in his stories. And it's just a lived in. It's the fact that the dude never leaves his house. You know, he lives in the same place, and he doesn't read. He watches the news and he watches shows, but he watches shows he likes. He plays games he likes. He's a little bit like a toddler in that way. He knows what he likes and he doesn't really branch out. So food, experiences, I think when you limit those things for yourself, you limit how many stories you can tell. Because, you know, when I'm with one of Dave's characters and they're at a restaurant, I know what they're going to order before they walk in the door. Like, there's just not that many choices. If they're being fancy, it's chicken parm, y'all. And that's if they're fancy and going to a fancy restaurant. All right. So that's limiting, because unless you're doing it in a comic way, like, my people only eat chicken parm, like, then it's funny. Which is why I've been also working with Dave to kind of lean into those things. Like, if you know you put a stand in every book, put a stand in every book, right? Because then it just becomes part of your personality or your voice. But I think that being aware of your limitations is just as important as being aware of your strengths, and then trying to work on those. So I think I'm able to go to a lot of genres because I'm very interested in a lot of genres. I just want to watch good stories. So, you know, like, I constantly got a queue. I've got a queue of about like 300 things lined up that I could watch between movies and TV shows. And, you know, I'm always watching something different. And I have little lists going on. Like, okay, I know this is something I could watch with Ethan and he won't complain. I know this is something I'll watch with Haley and we'll have great conversations. I know that this is something that Cindy will enjoy. It'll challenge her a little, but it'll be fun anyway. You know, so I've got all the different little lists, and I'm always watching something new and or different. And lastly, on being able to experiment a lot, because I think that is important. But you don't have to just see things through. And I used to be really bad about this. If I started a book, I would finish that book, damn it. If I started a movie, I'd finish it. If I started a series, I would watch at least the full season. I may not go to season 2, but I saw Riverdale, all of the episodes. So like, there's just no excuse for that. It won't, right?
Seriously, I watched one episode of that and was like, no, can I just take back that hour of my life?
Right. But if I start with episode 1 and there's 13 episodes in the season, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to watch 12 more. Or there used to be. This year, I've been really good. In fact, Bonnie, I've been keeping track, and I want to have a long conversation at the end of the year that we kind of record and just talk about this, because I think we'll both get a lot out of that. But I mean, even now, like I'll watch something and 2 episodes in, you know what? No. and I'll move on. So some of the things are like, name a show, first 2 episodes instead of season 1, you know, on the list. So yeah.
Well, how then do you keep track of like all of the tropes and all of the things you have to understand about the audience experience, which is different in different genres, you know, that people read different types of things for different reasons. And so I mean, I understand that you've got this like breadth of knowledge, but how do you kind of keep track so that when you're in a certain project, you kind of are able to deliver that experience and stay focused on that experience?
That's a great question. And I would answer that I'm really weak at that. So that is why my commercial genre fiction with Johnny and Dave thus far hasn't been especially commercial. It's why I think Bonnie really helps me keep on track for like, hey, this is what we're doing. It's why we've spent so much time in the last couple of years developing the production model, where I'm not just coming up with the ideas and then trying to articulate them, because I'm not as familiar with those genres. So because I'm not super allegiant to any one genre, I don't think I can have that kind of focus. I think my superpower here is that I bring that breadth of story to the genres, right? And I really like that we have genre specialists who can get some amount of like wider experience out there, especially when, you know, there's a bunch of us chattering in the storeroom about a specific idea, but we don't ever have to be like just super allegiant to that one genre. So I know that's having a cake and eating it too answer, but you know, I just want to know how many ideas I can get from the things that I watch, because I'm not putting them in terms of genre. So for example, we have all kinds of shorthand in the company. And I feel like the more stories I watch, the more stories I experience, the better my book of shorthand becomes. So like anytime we're talking about like, okay, well, the bad guys are doing it on purpose, that's a Nakatomi Plaza. Like we just know that the bad guys are doing it on purpose because they want, you know, the good guys to come in and do something that looks like it's going to hurt them, but really isn't. So the more things that we have like that, you know, we just, as a studio, watched The Watchmen for exactly that reason, because I knew there were a few things in there that, okay, this is common vocabulary. So if we were to say, it's an egg, you know, like we would all kind of have some idea what that means. And then, you know, the context would explain it the rest of the way. So I really like being able to just like Siler from Heroes, just experience all these different, you know, elements, and then be able to bring those into the conversation, and then rely on whoever is furnishing me an outline. Because here's another thing about the outlines. I can outline for somebody to write, or I can write to an outline, but ideally I'm not writing an outline and then writing to the outline, because I really like the removal there. I really like that somebody else is giving me something to interpret, or I'm creating something for somebody else to interpret. I feel like it removes me just enough to where I'm really excited about like telling the story. Plus I have somebody to impress. You know, if Bonnie gives me an outline, I'm like, all right, look what I'm going to do with your outline, Bonnie, right? And so I think that energy is important to bring to the collaboration. So it can go really wayward. So has anybody here, probably not because it's pretty new, Neve maybe, has anybody here seen Teenage Bounty Hunters yet? Okay, I knew it. God, you're so predictable.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just in like a sentence, what do you feel about Teenage Bounty Hunters? Have you seen the whole thing? Have you seen all 10 episodes?
No, I haven't got through it because other things came up, but I've watched a couple episodes so far. I like it, and I'm surprised that I like it, because I think it's 2 or 3 episodes I've watched. I expected it to be really stupid, and yet I find that I'm really enjoying it. It's sort of ridiculous and over the top, but it really seems to embrace that.
It is ridiculous. It is over the top. It does seem to embrace that. And I think, I really don't want to be wrong about this, but maybe I am. I think it's Genji Cohen, too, who did Weeds and Orange is the New Black. And I like her. I like her aesthetic, even though she's a little messy, especially with weeds, which got progressively worse by the season, but still had like a weird charm about it. I like that something that she does that I really love as a storyteller is to take very dramatic situations and make them absurd. And like, I mean, Orange is the New Black is a straight up empathy drama. And there were some flat out hilarious like moments in that show that were just really funny. Like humor is a part of the way she tells a story. But I think the show could be so much better if it knew what the hell it was. It's not clear on its genre. It's got way too much going on.
Not clear on its audience either.
At all. And so there's like all these things that I like about it. And I'm like, man, I really want to like this show more than I do. But it has, and also maybe it's because I've been reading Bonnie's Story Jacket book. So I can't help but pick shit apart as I'm watching. Like, well, there's a protagonist issue. There's a plausibility hole. So like I'm just seeing all these things, but I feel like it really does have a little bit of a schizophrenic personality. You know, is it a zany teen comedy? Is it a mock commentary on Christian schools? Is it like a bounty hunter send up? Like, and I just saw the 9th out of 10 episodes last night, and it was finally like, oh, so that's what you're setting up. Probably should have done that in episode 1. And then maybe I'd be super invested for this finale. So anyway, the point is, I think you can be all over the place in your ideas, but when it comes to execution, you do have to be a little bit more restrained, which is why I think we get a lot of really wild ideas all the time. But then once you get to the outline, if you do have all those wild ideas, that's your time to rein it in. So my next outline for a book I'll be starting next week is being written by Dave right now. And the story meeting I was talking about earlier was for this book. And yeah, I don't remember my point.
You just ran out of steam, like, oh.
I did. Well, I was like, I know it's gonna come to me, so I'm just gonna keep talking. But then it was just like clearly gone. Oh no, I do remember. So Dave had a lot of world building, and it was really good. It was really robust. A lot of things going on. But Bonnie has this really excellent way of just whittling that down to a singular issue or question. And she said, I think you have 2 stories going on here. And then she explained which each of the stories were. And she said, they're both good stories, but until we know which is the most important story, so which is the A and which is the B, we can't really tell the best story because we don't know what to put front and center and what for everything else needs to like work around. And so once we decided on that, the rest of the story meeting came really easy, enough so that Dave, we told him, hey, we'll all meet tomorrow, again. And at 5 o'clock this morning, which he wasn't up early, he hadn't gone to bed yet. He's lax. We don't have to meet today. I've got this. So, having those framing questions really help. And Dave's another one too, because he comes to the story meetings not with as much of a breadth of genre, but with a huge love of story and, a lot of stuff that he likes and all of those influences. But he, like 90, doesn't really have the vocabulary around that. He just knows what he likes. He knows what works for him, both as a consumer of story and as a creator of story. And so having someone like Bonnie who helps keep like us kind of more pure, wild storytellers kind of on the rails, I think is just invaluable.
It sounds like you listen a lot to the actual story you're trying to tell, as opposed to thinking about like, what does the genre want me to write, or what kinds of stories like should I be writing? It sounds like you're very, very open and receptive to what the outline is trying to communicate, and that you're using that to figure out how to get into the story. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's important. There are times when I haven't cared enough about the story. And if I don't care enough about the story, it's really hard to write. And it's just, I can't fake it. It's just never as good. It's funny because I am a bit of a chameleon. but I also have a very hard time faking it. So you would think that being a chameleon would mean you can just write anything and do anything. And it's not really like that. I used to be able to, like when it was just pure mercenary, like, you know, are you going to lose your house? Like, oh, I'll write it. Tell me what to write. But like, I am a little more spoiled than I used to be. You know, I'm just not trying to save my house right now. My children are not, neither one of them needs milk. Right. So we're in a pretty good place, you know, comparatively to, you know, 12 years ago when I would literally write anything, and I have. Also, product description, well, never mind. It doesn't matter what I've written. The point is, like, I have written anything, and I just want to care about what I'm writing these days. And so there's times, especially Johnny and I in the experimental days, where we would just write something to see if we could write to market, and we always failed, like every time. And so we have a very hard time, you know, quote, selling out. So what we've done is to take our desire to sell out, and by sell out, I just mean getting a lot of readers, and working with, you know, writers who are more invested in hitting those tropes, or like that's the kind of story they want to tell anyway. And it allows us to do both things. It allows us to tell the stories we want to tell the way we want to tell them, but build a studio around all these different voices and letting them influence each other, because there is no right or wrong way. It's just what we're naturally wired to do. And, you know, like when we talk about our strengths, right? It's learning what we're really good at so we can get better and better at that, and not wasting all the time doing the things that we're not super good at.
Could you talk a little bit about like what you do when you get a story that you're having trouble connecting with, or maybe it leans into something that is not one of your sweet spots, or maybe it's a tone that is not a tone that you prefer to write in? Can you talk about how you kind of get yourself into the right frame
Yeah,
of mind
I
to
do
work
try
on
to
it?
steep. So if I can't find, it's harder these days. I used to just go in and read something similar to what I was trying to, genre or voice or whatever. I would try to find something similar. But I spend so much time looking at words now, that, you know, it's harder. So I do try it with film or television. I'll find something in the genre or in a style or even just in a mood, you know, that will make me more excited about it, so that while I'm watching it, I can just kind of think about what I'm writing just a little bit. One other thing that helps is to just, I mean, this is really a different version of the same thing, just keep my brain going on it. So if I'm not that interested in it, I'm actually not going to spend my free time thinking about it. I'm going to spend my free time thinking about how I don't want to do it. So something that might help, like let's say there's a book that I know I'm struggling with a little bit. I'm used to getting, you know, 5,000 words a day or whatever. And I have a few days where I'm like 1,500 words, 2,000. I just know I'm kind of trailing, and I can see, you know, I can look at the horizon and say, well, if I'm doing this now, this book is going to take me 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks longer than I want. That really sucks. I need to solve this problem. And so then, like, I don't do this now. Before I go to bed, I don't look at the next day's words and read over them, or, you know, work on my outline or anything. But if I'm not into the story, I should probably do that. I should probably look at what I have to write the next day and maybe just go over my outline for whatever I have waiting for me in the morning, and just think about it just a little bit, even 5-10 minutes, just because I'm not going to want to do it on my own. So prompting myself is good. And then, you know, it doesn't have to be related, ladies and gentlemen, at all. That's the way stories work. So if I write something at night, you know, like right now I'm writing something that has a tone that's a little bit like Cloverfield Lane, something like that. So I might go to bed, and Cindy and I aren't going to watch Cloverfield Lane. She's like, come on, I put up enough of your shenanigans. I don't want to watch Cloverfield Lane tonight. Maybe we're watching Mad Men, you know, but there's something about the internet interaction between Betty and Dawn that just gives me pause. And I'm like, I can use that. You know, story is story is story. And I think that we focus too much on genre. And I do love the streaming wars, because I think they're really expanding what we expect from stories. And I think that something like teenage bounty hunters. You know, I think that even though it is a very imperfect product, I think it's a great product because I like what it signals to where things are going, that more chances are being taken with story and more voices are getting out there. And I think that we are less beholden to genre because of the streaming wars. And I think it's really interesting to extrapolate where story is headed and where we're going to be 10 years from now. And I do think that there are less restrictions and things will get a little more liquid than they are.
One of the things that I really admire about you is your ability to tap into different types of, or different aspects of your voice. It's like you have all of these things that are part of your voice, like the way you use humor and the way you use language and the way you use metaphor. But you do seem to be able to adjust that according to like what genre you're writing in and what the story is. And that's something that I personally struggle a little bit with, and I know a lot of writers who do. Right? It's like, because we have like a strong voice that we prefer to write in, and we have things that come to us naturally and things that don't. Can you talk a little bit about, is there anything you do in terms of mental preparation when you're starting to write something new? Do you think about that, or is it more about just getting into the characters that kind of helps you modulate your voice?
I think it's probably just getting into the characters. I don't know. I need to think about that to give a better answer. But normally, I'll say this. Normally, my first drafts, probably regardless of genre, are a little bit more even. So what I mean by that is that they're not as distinct. So the Cloverfield Lane thingy that I'm writing right now, you know, it's very small. There's just really there's 3 characters, but it's all, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of feelings, but the story is restrained enough that it doesn't get carried away. I had a pretty good idea of who these people were before I started the book. Now, having said that, I don't know them. Never met them. Like, I'm just making shit up on page 1. And a lot of times when, you know, you're writing, you are bullshitting yourself. So, I mean, I think probably we all do this, but here's an example I did today. You know, it was right before, I think my timer went off too. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm answering that later. But, you know, it was, you know, so-and-so opened the door and felt 3 things at once. I don't know what 3 things she felt. Like, I have 0 idea what 3 things she felt. I know she felt 3 things, and I know they're all at once. And I know that by the, you know, it's like what I do in real life. I start a sentence and I'm like, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to finish that before I go. So that happens, you know, paragraph to paragraph to paragraph when I'm writing. And I think probably when a lot of people are writing, we're just making stuff up. So by the time I get to the end of the book, I know these people better. And I know what voice is most appropriate for the ideal reader and for the experience that these 3 characters are going to want to create for the reader. So then it's my job to not really worry about that my first time through. I'm really just focusing on getting the story out, and a lot of the voice does come. You know, like, I know there's some pretty good jokes already. There's some pretty good scares. You know, a lot of it in the draft is already there. But the last 20%, I think, Bonnie, really answers your question. I think in the edit and polish, that's where the voices get refined enough to really feel like they're bespoke. If you were to look at my rough draft, I don't think you would necessarily say you're really good at being specific about the experience.
Okay, I have one last question for you in terms of changing and adapting and being fluid. Now, how about when you're telling the same story but in a different medium? Because you've been doing a lot of adaptation, you know, for different stories in the studio lately. And I know, like, I recently listened to a 17-hour audiobook and then watched, you know, the 2 hours of TV that the BBC created from it. And it was like, wow, because they managed to, you know, like, get all the relevant things, dump the stuff that doesn't actually drive the story. But I think that adapting your own work and chucking stuff out would be so hard. So how do you do that? Like once the story's committed to paper, telling it in a new and different way?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, I think that I've really enjoyed the adaptation process. I think it makes me a leaner, stronger writer. Um, and it makes me understand the story more because you have to communicate things so differently. You know, you get a lot of, I mean, you get subtext and text in novels as much as you want. But in a book, I'm sorry, in a movie on TV, you get, you know, about a minute per page is the formula. And you're going to have some dialogue, you're going to have some action, and all of it has to be visual. So it's not like, you know, occasionally you can do something cheap, like, you know, have your character writing in a diary with a voiceover or something, but it always feels a little cheap. Or I'm watching a show right now on Apple Plus called Truth Be Told, and it's Octavia Spencer and Aaron Paul, and Octavia Spencer is a podcaster, and Aaron Paul is possibly in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Who knows? And I don't even know. I have a few more episodes to go. And so the device that they use is that she is a podcaster, and so she could just straight up spit exposition to the audience, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, it would be lazy writing if she wasn't doing it in a serious NPR podcast voice. But because she uses this serious NPR podcast voice, her straight up exposition is just forgivable. So if you can do that, do it. By all means, find ways to be clever with the way that you communicate to your reader or your audience. So in our book, Dead City, there's a lot to communicate about this entire world. And the opening scene in that book is a reporter who is being dressed for a field visit where they have feral zombies running around. And so because she has to go through all these security checks, they're telling her information that she already knows, and that in any other context she wouldn't have to sit there and listen to, but she does because it's the law. we've all been there where we've had to listen to the bullshit security whatever, and so we believe as the reader that she's having to do this even though she already knows this information. So I think that when you can kind of like make your audience know that, like, okay, look, we got to give you this information, and we don't really want to take you to exposition laboratories where they're just going to straight up tell you in a boring info dump way. So we're gonna have a podcast, or we're gonna have an exit exam or whatever it is. But when you're doing adaptations, you really have to think about everything visual. So I was recently working on an adaptation of one of the two books I mentioned earlier that I've written with Bonnie. So yeah, it's funny. We have books that haven't come out yet that we're working on the adaptations for. That's just kind of where we are.
That's how we roll.
But I think both of you saw this example actually, because it was page 1 of the script, and there's all this information that you have to know about the main character that in the book it's easy because you just tell the reader, hey, guess what? This dude's made a bunch of movies, and he's wants to make his dream project, but he resents the movies that made him famous. Like, there's a lot of time and space that we have to make that, and we don't have that in the screenplay. So instead, it opens up with him and his agent in their car, and they're on their way to this pitch. But here, I just stop them at a red light, before they get to the place where it opens up. And at that red light, there's a billboard for the animated series of his biggest franchise. And he says something disparaging about it, and his agent says something about how he doesn't appreciate what he has. And there's like all of this stuff that you needed to know is now, and including that the billboard itself is like an animated billboard, which shows that it's in the not too distant future. So there's like all of these things that are communicated within, like, it's not even half a page, that took many, many pages to convince a reader of the other way. So it's it's a magic trick. It's just a very different way of conveying information to the reader. And the more that you understand the two mediums and how they work together, kind of the more elegant your storytelling can be.
Yeah, because it's like the ultimate show don't tell.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think we could go on and on. I mean, you're the easiest person to interview because you always have something to say. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and Dave and Johnny as well, you know, for you guys really took the interview seriously. We sort of said, hey, can we do this with the podcast? And you guys were all like, sure, okay, we'll give it a go. But I think it was really fun, and it was good to get to talk to you from the slightly different angle and change up the format a little bit. So thanks for letting us steal your show for a bit.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate everyone in our studio, but you guys really make all of these dreams happen. So I love that we're talking. I love that we have these conversations, and I love that we share some of our best takeaways, because there's so much that happens in our studio just on a week-to-week basis, not just in our meetings. Well, our story meetings, our marketing meetings, all of it. We're always like learning and churning, and it's really fun. And it's nice to be able to break it down and, you know, hopefully help on a wider scale.
Yeah. So next week we'll be back. Actually, Bonnie and I will both be on next week. So we'll be on with you guys, but we'll pass
Yay!
back to you. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. This has been the Story Studio podcast with Neve, Niney, and Bonnie, and for the last time. And we'll see you next week with the guys. Bye, everyone.
Adios.